Alrighty, good morning. Call the Budget Committee to, order and, ask for approval of the minutes from, October 21st. Moved by Mr. Kenny, seconded by Mr. Strau. Any additions, corrections? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Oh, sorry. No, that's all right, that's all right.
Okay. The first item on the agenda, today is a presentation by the SPCA and, their desire and their request for funding from the county for their
Where's that done?
their works. So, Mr. Hickey, and
Yeah, I got one on my seat, too.
I believe you all have a budget in your packets.
Another copy of that.
No, that's fine. Hi, everyone, I'm Chris Hickey. I'm the treasurer for the SPCA, and Jim's asked me to just give you a brief overview of the budget that we put together. As I said the last time that we were here, us taking this over is, we've been doing it for a little less than a year now in trying to, turn the service, which has wholly been a volunteer service for years, into a service that's a 24/7 service for the county. As we talked about, we have a couple independent contracts with two of the local towns, Lake Luzerne and Lake George, and we're in the process of we put forth a contract for the city of Glens Falls. No activity on that as of yet, and we've begun to build the infrastructure to be able to support the impounding of animals, which is a really important piece of what we're trying to do. Historically, all of the impounding has been done at the Glens Falls Animal Hospital at a pretty steep fee for us and for the towns, because the towns get charged directly as well for a piece of that impound fee. So we're constructing a new facility on Blind Rock Road in conjunction with the Talswag Inn. That's due to open before the end of the year. Is that correct, sir?
For Thanksgiving.
Okay. So we'll begin to do that. The budget that we put together, and the biggest component of the budget is obviously the need to be able to have paid staff. Really the transformation from a volunteer type of service to a paid staff service. And between salaries and wages and payroll tax and benefits at this point in time, we're estimating it'll cost us about $80,000 a year, just over $80,000 a year to do that. And that's developing a system that is mainly on call. We would pay an individual to be on call 24/7, and then obviously when they are called, we would pay them an hourly rate. And we've estimated what those hourly rates should be in here to be competitive and to be able to hire somebody into that role, and that they would be comfortable for that role. We did meet with members of the administration to try to talk about what opportunity there might be to ramp up, because I understand we're going from 8 to 20 to 100, and totally recognize the significance of that. So we did meet with the chairman and some of the staff members to talk about opportunities to do that. One would be for us not to be 24/7. Okay, so if we sat back and said, we're only going to do 16 hours a day instead of 24 hours a day. We won't do the midnight shift, as an example. And we said we could do that, whether it serves the county or not, because when we're not doing it, it's going to be done by the sheriff's department. They're going to get the call. So the sheriff's department is going to have to respond to an animal-related call. Let's just say between the hours of 12 and 8. We haven't talked specifically whether it be 11 to 7, 12 to 8, whatever the shift might happen to be. We believe we could cut back $20,000 off the $100,000 request if we were to do that. Yeah.
I take it you track the number of calls you get. How many calls do you actually get in that window?
You know, we don't have, as I said before, we've got we responded to 2,900, roughly 2,900 calls. We do not have a good system right now that tells us, because we've only been doing it for a year,
Okay.
what time of the day those calls come in. I talked to Jim about it, who's been doing most of the calls, and he says we respond to less calls from in the midnight shift. Sure. But typically they're a longer in duration because you're going to a situation that isn't necessarily stable. Maybe it's a suicide with a dog guarding a body or something like that. And they're a little bit more complex. And again, that's not scientific in any nature other than just the gut feeling of those that have been doing the calls.
No sense
So-
of the number we're talking
Yeah,
about.
so we estimated 25% of the calls probably happen at night.
Okay.
And that the other 75% happen, you know, in the other two
You're saying night,
shifts.
11 to 7 or 12 days?
Yeah, one of those,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
midnight,
that's definitely the lowest,
typical midnight call.
but the one thing, if I can interject, I mean,
Absolutely.
I don't think you're gonna see us say no. I mean, if there's a massive, there's something going on, and you all know me, and I'm just gonna go. You know, we did over a dozen suicides this year alone. We get called to DWIs, car accidents. State police are not authorized to carry animals in their vehicles. So that's one issue. But like I said, the suicides are a little bit more in depth because you're dealing with a protective animal. You know, I can even show you videos of these protective animals. We've put a compilation together just so you, they're not pleasant and it's not an easy thing. It's not for the public to see when you're trying to force a situation on an animal. So that's why we did spend the money to train all of our officers. Thank you. Oh, by the way, John, I am on a 2-hour block.
Oh.
Just so it's clear.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, the base of the budget obviously is in relationship to putting together the infrastructure, which the SPCA has used donated funds to do that. We've bought the vehicles, we're building the building. That cost has really been borne by donors from the past. We're just trying to ramp up other sources of revenue, grant funding. We've hired an individual to write some grants for us. We've put together, Darlene's put together a website with, you know, an opportunity to donate. Our challenge is that we have a very poor, we have an identity crisis. Most people, when you talk about the SPCA, they think about the SPCA across from the airport. That's not us. That's the SPCA of upstate New York. Their primary focus is you know, adoptions and adoptions of dogs. They're you know, they're not out there as you know, an arm of law enforcement, which we are to do the situations that we do. The problem is whenever you read an obituary or see somebody asking for donations, those donations are pretty much all going to the SPCA of upstate New York. We're trying to change that. We're trying to make people realize that the Warren County SPCA is a separate organization and is also in need of philanthropic support to be able to grow.
Just kind of,
Yeah, I've talked to Jim about this, I just wanna be absolutely clear in my mind on this, that those, municipalities that you, two so far, that you contract with to, be their animal control officer, you contract with the municipalities independently, like, for example, you're waiting, apparently a contract with Glens Falls as well, as the two, you have contracts with Lake George and what they're doing now.
Yep.
Yeah,
for,
to enforce their code.
To enforce their code for animal control.
Correct.
And that the program and the services that we're talking about here are an umbrella of services that everyone benefits from, maintaining the animals, shelter, that kind of thing. Or those situations that towns, really can't handle, they become, they're gonna move right into litigation. Some of them get very, very severe, or you say certain responses in the off hours, dealing with the sheriff or the state police, that could happen anywhere around the county. I just wanna make sure that
Basically, what we're also, it's a backup, for animal control. I mean, if your animal, a lot of the part-timers have regular jobs. You can't get your normal animal control during that 8 to 5 unless, like, George, your animal control officer, you integrated him with his job duty, and, which has worked out great. George is one of the best, I think, ACOs in the county. But, like I said, when you can't get that guy out there, like when we went up the North River with dogs and cars, and it was just, we had a lot going on, but we covered every call that weekend. That was 37 calls in a weekend, you know, at the end of summer. And we don't, I think every animal control officer, like, even, I'm working with, try to work with every one of them, has been pretty receptive to our help, because if they need gear, we got the gear. If they need advice, if they need I'm a approved New York State dangerous dog evaluator. Right there, they have a professional, if they're questioning a dangerous dog, which is a very tough business, do that. That's what they have. I'm used in the court systems in New York State to evaluate dogs as well. So there's a lot of knowledge and experience that comes with calling the SPCA to a specific call. Plus, we're there. If you're, and we're not trying to rub it in anybody's face. If they can't go, call us. That's what we're there for. We're that entity that's professional and trained to back up your animal control. And a lot of what happens is what we're starting to see is some of these cases are starting to go into cruelty, and the animal control officers are going, ooh, you know, that's when they start to get nervous, and you got to work with the police and know the paperwork to put in and take affidavits, and you got to be registered with New York State as a peace officer before you do any of that. So that's the professionalism that comes in with the SPCA. So like you said, it is a whole umbrella for the county. For any situation, we're really there for.
But what I'm,
Go ahead.
what I'm trying to find out or impress upon you in terms of your cost structure is that if you're providing services to a municipality equivalent to being a local animal control officer, you contract for those services apart from the 100 that we're talking about now.
That's correct.
Okay, that's.
That's correct. And one of the conversations that, you know,
And just so you know, just so you know, and that's important, because that way municipalities aren't paying twice, right?
Yep.
They're paying for their animal control officer, and then they're paying for, something through the county allocation.
Correct.
That what the counties, what this program is doing is maintaining that umbrella, if you will, of coverage for the whole of the county, for those things that we all need, to take advantage of on occasion, whether it be the shelter, whether it would be, the expertise that you bring into specific cases. We had 1 or 2 in Bolton, as you pointed out, where we really needed to pick it up a notch, I guess is the way to say it, or bring in other experts. And any town could be faced with that, not just Bolton, it could be Chester or whatever. So that's what I'm really, the
Well,
point
and
of my
here's the
question.
big difference, though, too, is animal control and code enforcement in your towns is primarily dogs. That's it. Our biggest expense is cats. The SPCA has also turned into a cat depot for every town. Our bills are $4,000 to $5,000 a month, and trying to be humane, and this is from every town. So that's how the towns benefit. We have calls this weekend. We're gonna bring in 27 cats out of 3 different municipalities that are in this room right now. There's no reason, but that's what covers it, and that's what we're really facing right now is we don't have a spay and neuter program in Warren County. That's something that we'd like to develop in 2016, because you gotta turn the faucet off somewhere. We're getting railed with cat issues all over the county. Your local animal control cannot deal with a cat hoarding situation, 40, 50 cats in a trailer. I'm gonna say 75% of the towns in Warren County have a cat problem, and that we're addressing just about every cat problem we can. And it's costly, and that's part of what we're dealing with, is that I think as the supervisors understand, you know, your animal control officer can only deal with a very small amount of 5 different things usually, is his or her job duty is to deal with. Everything else can fall under the SPCA. And that's, animal control is primarily dogs in New York State, that's it. So like I said, these hoarding cats, and it's not hoarding situations, let me change that word. We have a situation right now, these are some of the nicest little ladies you've ever met, but they'd rather pay for this cat's food than their heat. We can come in and help them out of this bad situation, start moving a cat at a time, you know, try to get the adoption. We work with rescues right away, so we don't have to, we try to end these hoarding situations quickly. We have great relationships with smaller rescues. We support them. So what happens is, when we have a hoarding situation, we go 2 cats to this rescue, 2 cats to every, but you need that service, or you're gonna see residents, you know, I don't wanna think the worst, but these residents need help, and they're in poverty levels that they can't afford shots, they can't afford food, they can't afford cat litter. That's where we come in. We've delivered over 1,000 pounds of food throughout Warren County the past 2 weeks of people in need. That's another thing we have. We have a food bank. I mean, there's a multitude of things that come with the county and us serving the municipalities, or serving the county as a whole.
If you're unable to secure a contract with the municipality, what then? You mentioned that you have a contract under employment. What happens at that point? Let's say you have contracts with different municipalities, you've negotiated, you've got a contract for service, but let's say you can't negotiate with a particular municipality for animal control.
By law, they have to have an animal control officer by New York State law, so state mandated. So they have to figure it out.
They have to figure it out.
Yeah, and we're just offering a professional service.
Now that you're there to help them, but if they choose not to.
Right, it's,
Correct.
They're on
that's
their
up
own.
to them.
They're on
Yeah.
their
Oh,
own.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, very good.
I mean, ideally, as Jim said, his program is providing an umbrella over that. Individual responsibility still rests with each individual municipality.
Mr. Gerard?
Mr. Conover covered pretty much what I was gonna ask.
All
I
right.
guess the city council, if you have a pending contract,
We're,
if you haven't heard back.
we've submitted it with the county clerk. I believe the chief of police put in a letter as well with, the proposal. And the only reason is we work well with the police, and we know the laws, and we know the ag and markets laws, and that's the only reason we put a proposal on, because we also have a 24/7 service that we offer with animal control. So that's, we're right now, we're just waiting to hear back from the mayor.
What was the amount that you were looking for?
20,000. It's less than the current
It's
contract.
less than what they're currently paying.
It's less than what they're, I'm surprised he hasn't called you.
Now,
15 cents a
clarify,
call.
it's not much less, so I don't think it's in the paper, it's, I think, $600 or something like that, less than the current estimate.
Mr. Kenny?
Yes, we have a rather long agenda. I suggest you give us your recommendation for level of funding.
My recommendation?
Yes.
Well, I guess my recommendation, I would go with the, do away with the nighttime, you know, from 12 to 8, and, probably fund it at 80, I guess.
I'll put that in the form of a motion.
I'll second that. I have a question. What are you anticipating the town of Lake George is gonna be paying next year?
100,000.
Dollars in the bill, yeah.
Same
no.
percentage
we
increase,
don't.
no, we're just getting.
You're saying, we don't wanna increase anything, we're just staying the same. Nobody, no, I think Luzerne may have said here, here's another $50 a month, because they had it in the budget for animal control, so but I believe we're keeping that, we're not touching what we're billing Lake George at all, don't worry about that.
No, it wasn't.
Mr. Straugh?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for the sake of disclosure, I am on the board of the SPCA. I do not make any monetary gain from being such, but I think for the sake of, the appearance of independency of this committee from that organization, I will refrain from voting on any financial arrangement.
Okay. Dennis, you'll have to refrain too, you're not on the committee. So we have a motion by Mr. Kenny, do we have a second?
There you go.
Seconded by Mr. Monroe.
It's
Yes.
all right.
I have a question. It's not clear to me, where any surplus stands. It seems to me when we reviewed this situation about a year ago, there was a substantial surplus. Is that just gone, or what's happened with that?
Well, the donation that we originally received, we have, as I indicated in the beginning, we used it to train, outfit our officers. We used it to purchase 2 vehicles, rather than paying mileage to our officers when they're out on calls. And we used it to construct the impound facility that we're doing. At this point in time, there's about $50,000 in funds from that original donation that remain, which, at this point in time, we're reserving the donation, and as we said to the committee before, is the donation and any fundraising we can do to continue to develop and expand the equipment, the resources, and things like that. This is really the operational component of the budget.
Do you anticipate in future years that the donations will help subsidize the operations? I mean, is this gonna start at 80 and go to 100 and then to 120 and, or are we gonna keep going?
No, I don't think, other than the fact that I think you're going to have inflationary impact on the operational side, no different than any other budget that you have. I think it will depend on whether or not, and I have to, full disclosure, a lot of what we've done is identifying estimates of the number of hours. This is an hourly based contract, okay? What we've proposed says that those officers are gonna get called out for 3,000 hours a year, okay? And, from the perspective of us coming back next year, if those officers get called out for 4,000 hours a year because of the need of the county, then yes, we're gonna be coming back here and we're gonna have to ask for more money. If that $3,000 estimated number of hours is an accurate estimated number of hours, then I'm saying the only change that you'll see moving forward would be inflationary changes to the contract. And again, it's also contingent upon, what we are able to do. We have to still research the opportunity to, for other revenue sources. Unfortunately, they may affect the accounting in another area. An example that Jim has given me is, dog bites. For dog bites, we currently go out and evaluate the animal the day of the dog bite. 10 days later, we have to go back and evaluate the animal again to make sure there's no changes to the animal. Right now, Jim's doing that as part of this agreement. Other counties charge public health for those 2 visits. So the question would be, does it make sense to charge for public health for those type of visits? Right now, we're not proposing that, but I think those are things we have to continually evaluate as the service grows and develops. Are there other sources of revenue where we should be charging individuals for the service that we're providing versus it being part of this contract through the county?
Okay. Yes, Mr. Taylor.
Just a quick question, is the sheriff doing any work now that you will pick up as part of this?
Jim, you can probably answer that better than me. They're being called to calls. Typically, if you have a dog bite, we're not the only ones being called. The sheriff's being called to that situation as well, or law enforcement, I should say, is being called to that situation as well. I don't think that's necessarily gonna change.
Trying, that's a good point.
Good question.
And that was really my goal, why are 2 to 3 agencies getting called for 1 call? And I think we work so well with the sheriff's department and they know our professionalism, we've seen a little shift in that, where we just go and I'll even tell them, you don't need to send an officer over, keep him out on the road, or, we're seeing a shift, but that's one thing that we wanna accomplish here is, 1 agency response. You don't have to send 2 troopers or sheriff for 1 dog running over somebody's yard, it does happen at times because it's just, somebody will get a call, the trooper won't hear the sheriff calling, but we're trying to eliminate that, and we think it'll take a little bit off the sheriff. We do already. I mean, you know, when they call us for these DWIs, they're not sitting there. They can move on with their investigation or whatever they have to do because we eliminate that little portion of what they don't wanna deal with or can't deal with. So, I think we're seeing a shift in that whole response of too many agencies coming for one call. I think it'll help with law enforcement.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? One abstain. All righty, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Before we move on to number 2, at the last budget meeting, I believe Mr. Conover suggested that we contact the department heads once again, and our county administrator, Mr. Dusick, did that. And from that contact, we did get some response. One was from the planning department, eliminating a temporary GIS technician, savings of $22,392. The treasurer's office come up with a $3,500. And the clerk of the board had suggestions for savings, but I don't think it's the budget committee's purview. I think might be savings for 2017. Different ideas on how the board functions, and we're not gonna settle that here today.
Chairman, were those, is it your judgment and county administrator's judgment that those savings, that we should try to achieve those savings, with those, reductions? What's your sense of it? I mean,
Well, I think they would need to go to the support services committee and be discussed and debated, because I think they're definitely debatable. Doing a summary of the minutes was an example. Having meetings in the afternoon, morning and afternoon, so that we'd only be here, we'd be here less days. There was a couple others too. So, I think that's more for support services than us. My opinion. Yes.
I had a chance to briefly speak with Amanda about it, and I think some of those savings were also in mileage reduction,
Mileage, right.
Then through meetings to a 3-day a month schedule or something similar, you're gonna see a lot of savings in mileage, let alone going back and forth for various meetings. But I know, I think it would be great at some point to have Amanda come and speak with us, even regarding, trying to go paperless and condensing these meeting schedules, reducing mileage costs. I mean, she had some really wonderful ideas. I think they all work for
Yep.
that.
Oh, I do too.
I'd love to be able to get it done for January, but
Right. Probably more realistic would be for the 2017 budget, because, if you're gonna go digital, then that's gonna be an expense, at least to get started.
can I just, Amanda, not to jump on it, I know though that you had mentioned to me maybe there was some savings in the budget line, towards the end of the year, was that, maybe if we're talking about in November, we won't have that impact into next year anyway.
We were thinking there might be money left over in our budget this year that we could possibly purchase tablets if the board was in favor of going that way. But there's some things in there that I'm not sure exactly what they were budgeted for. So right now, we're not using those funds, but until the year winds up, we don't wanna tag purchases that we might need the money for afterwards. Plus, Mike Colvin is working on a summary of what it would cost he's looking into what tablet he thinks would work best, but then it's also something that, you wouldn't have the paper resolutions going out anymore, so it's something that we'd have to change the rules of the board, which we can do, but it's something that everyone needs to agree on.
Right. I agree.
And then as far as the, changing the meeting schedule, it would just be reducing the number of days that you have to come here.
Right.
So there would be a reduction in mileage, and it might help us if we had all the meetings earlier in the schedule. We may be able to get the resolutions out faster, but they're just different things. There's not tremendous savings, but
Some, right. Well, with that, we'll move on to number 2 and, review and discussion of the budget summary, which I believe you have in your packet. Also, my recommendations. Currently, the appropriations revenues, personnel requests, and also the, adjustments to the non-bargaining salaries. I believe there was 14 adjustments, if I counted correctly, and, the 2.5% raise. So I can go down the, budget officer's, recommendations on the appropriations. First one is, the contract with, Glens Falls, and because we reduced the sales tax, the way we did, and I'll refresh your memory, we went to, the actual amount for 2014, which was 49,404,038, and we multiplied that by 0.6%, which gives you a 2015 projected of, 49,700,462. And we took that projected figure and multiplied that by 1%. So that's 50,197,466, to put into the 2016 budget. So because the sales tax, went down, that's why that's, decreased. The next one is the savings from the county treasurer. The Board of Elections, I reduced, the first one by 45,000 and the second by 20,000. Given the history, we went back 7 or 8 years, it was never over 54,000. So rather than budget it, if, for some strange reason it runs way up, we'll have to, take it out of contingent or something. I can't see budgeting that much money just because something might happen. The next one is the contract with, Gaslight Village. The next is the distribution of the, sales tax. Ag and Markets is Cooperative Extension. They asked for, they asked for 49,000 for to operate on Fridays, the 5th day. I decided not to do that. I did put in, 17,000 for, a nutrition person, nutrition educator, and 17,000 for the, logging, training educator, and also 6,600 for, pay raises. So it's up by 40,000. Other budgetary is the computer and vehicle reserve. Road machinery. I guess we took $120 from this subscription. The Andorus Law is 7,000 in revenue. The overall sales tax, by going to 50,197,467, is an actual decrease of $451,000 to the money available, I guess we'd say. There's 3 items there from Gaslight Village. The first 2, I believe, are a wash. I believe the second one is also. Probation is 7,000 for DWI state aid. The Fire Training Center, Mr. LaFleur requested a cleaning person, $5,000 a year, and half of it's paid by Washington County and half of it's paid by Warren County. So that's the $2,500. Mental health. And the county road, bridges and other governmental charges, a decrease of 11,881. and, road machinery. This is, interfund revenues, these are the funds that are charged to each department for use of, DPW equipment. I also have in your packet the overall, summary, produced by, Mr. Lynch, that shows each department, increase or decrease, so. If you have any questions on them, I'll try to answer them, or one of us will. Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, for purposes of the committee, because in case they might see this discrepancy from what was sent out versus what you have before you, this departmental budget request and budget officer's rec, which is this multi-page document, this was revised from what was sent out to you with last-minute numbers changes. There were a number of them that were made for various reasons. But I also think that another important aspect of this, and Rob Lynch can correct me if I'm wrong, but in order to make the budget work, if you will, you'll note that he's projecting a 1.35% increase in the tax rate, whereas our normal amount is 1.51. Am I reading that correctly, Rob?
Well, the 1.51 is a little bit above that.
Right.
That's on the, be raised by taxes is the 1.51.
Right. What's the 1.35?
That's after reducing the, town's, pledging of sales tax money.
Okay, so you are using the 1.51 and then you drop to the 1.35 as a technical number because of some towns leaving sales tax here. Okay. And then you gave also the tax cap amount of 2.58, which that's a calculation that Rob does based on state criteria. Everybody talks about a tax cap of being at 2%, but it's actually, it's 2%, but it's also based on a calculation which includes, if you didn't use prior year's maximum limits, et cetera, and there's some other things that go in the calculation, which I'm sure Rob can explain if you'd like to know. But the bottom line is, we could actually go to a 2.58 and actually be considered, you know, that's the tax cap. So we're raising 1.51, at least in this proposed budget, but you have that leeway of going up higher than that, up to that limit. Now, 2.58, Rob, is that the limit itself? I mean, would we have to be at 2.57 to be under that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you
Okay.
can exactly add it.
Right,
That's
okay.
the limit, I guess.
All right. I just wanted to point that out for the committee's attention.
Mr. Chairman, so the, on the final page, the, line item called, less appropriated surplus, general funds, 1.7.
Right.
That would be, you're thinking in terms of what we would budget out of the fund balance, is that?
So that would be the decrease.
I'm sorry, that's correct.
So what we take out of the fund balance would be the 531.
The 531, all right. I think, may I?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, I think, bringing down the, that appropriation, I think is a very wise thing to do. There's no faster way, as you know, to deplete your fund balance than to have, too high an appropriation of, your unobligated fund balance, because if you're not replenishing your
Right.
fund balance, you just, in a couple of years, you'll go through it. Just like that, so I think if we're find ourselves in a position to reduce that appropriation, that's a wise thing. It's quite a bit to go down in 1 year, but
Right.
still, it's
There's some other items too that, well, with like the SPCA, that's, 20 of it's already in these numbers, so we'll, we have to add additional 60. I would like to, I'm gonna recommend that we fund the, fire alarm system, the $62,000. It's just ridiculous to do anything else. As far as the, roads and the paving, I plan on taking, 250,000 out of, the machinery line, the automotive machinery line in DM, and, shifting that to, the 5112 in the, D fund. I hope to add another 41,000, which will give us, 291, and we have 2,000,009, which will give us 2.3 million towards, the paving. That's, so, obviously the 250 is in there, is in that budget, but the 41 is not. The 62 is not in this numbers, and, yes, 60,000, so. And then we still have other items, I guess, possibly. So that's where I'm at with, as far as the, putting more money towards paving roads. That'll be a total of, 650,000, I think it is, for actual tax money, actual county tax money. The rest is chips. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Paul, the, 5-year projection, that we developed, I don't have it in front of me, but did you, make some assumptions, you or Joanne make some assumptions in terms of an appropriation out of the fund balance, and what were those assumptions on the 5-year projection? Do you have those handy?
We were, let's see if I can find it here. Let me just gotta find it. Okay, on the general fund for 2016, we were projecting 960,750, so you're actually lower than what we were projecting.
So, save an increase in, expenditures, that would fall to the fund balance.
Correct.
And how about the outlying years? What were you showing as an appropriation on the, 2, 3, 4, and 5?
17, we were showing 1.492, 1.4 million, or 1.5 million, say. We were showing 929,000 in 18, and then we were showing 1,245,000 in 19. Now, what we will do is, based on now these new numbers, we will rerun this, because if you'll recall, our multi-year plan is based on the 215 numbers, but also the 216 budget. So now that we know what you're gonna actually do in 216, we'll rerun these and show you what the difference is. But one point I do wanna make is that we were still, your expenses were still exceeding your revenues, and they still are, no matter what you do. So the question becomes how long you can continue that path and what the effects are. But you're certainly better off now than we were when we looked at this the other day.
Well, I was actually thinking of it in light of the treasurer's recommendation to, at least raise the floor, and what, from 6 million to something else. And under the existing projection, I think you were showing less westbound. I think you were showing a fund balance of, like, in an order of magnitude of 10-ish.
Less Westmount,
This would be the top line on the fund balance before the, other two lines, I think.
well, if you look at the,
I'm going out now, I'm not talking about next year, I'm saying if you go out, I think you showed it declining.
yeah, you decline ultimately down to 10 million before
10 million,
Westmount.
and so my point is that that begins, if you raise your bottom up to 10, then you're you know, you got a different kind of issue.
Right.
So
that number will be a little higher based on what these new developments are.
Again, I'm just making a full circle, maybe once again to say, I think it's a wise thing to, have a budget that's, significantly reduced what is really one-time revenue, as opposed to cyclical revenue. I commend the, budget officer for architecting it in that fashion.
Mr. Stroh.
On Westmont, and I'm on this sheet, it's at the bottom of the second to last page. The revenues over expenditures. And then the net budget decrease of $1,019,616. Does that mean that's what we're saving in our budget?
That's the total general fund, the $1,019,000.
Right, but it's in the negative.
Yep, if you go back, a few pages. It's in here somewhere. Let's see if I can pull it up. Public nursing home. Not sure what page you're on. Here, I have a different sheet here.
Oh, there you go.
It decreased by $1,362,573.
All right, well, my question, I guess, is that's what we're saving from not having Westmont in the forthcoming year?
I believe so, yes.
Oh, is he looking at his sheet?
there it is. Public nursing home, that's where Westmont
Oh, yes.
Services are shown.
Yes, Mr. Brock?
I had two concerns, and you've answered one of them. One was the fire alarm, and the other was the roof on the old brick building. I'm more about avoiding future costs if it gets worse. Is it in bad shape now, or is it just projected to be getting bad? Where's the thing?
Jeff is here. I think Jeff in the past has been looked at, and my understanding it is leaking.
There's been some, attempted repairs on it, but none of them are substantial to keep it viable, so there was some discussion several years ago about what to do with that building, whether the county should look at parceling that off and putting it on the market as is, or, demoing the building, or, doing a major rehab and retaining it, and either leasing it or, using it for county operations, but it's been kind of on hold in recent years, but the significant repair work that's needed has not been.
If we leave it, obviously it's gonna get worse, but I mean, is it gonna get significantly worse, or?
Well, the longer we leave it, the worse, the faster it'll accelerate. I don't know that we've been up into the roof structure here in the past year, but we can take another look at it, certainly. We know it didn't fix itself, so.
Should we address that, or, I'm looking at it more in terms of
Yep, I know what you
added costs. It might be $50,000 now, it might be
Right.
whatever.
Okay.
I have 12 o'clock, I'm running late, so please excuse me.
Alrighty. Yes, Mr. Conover.
Yeah, you could check with, Dave Wick, but I think it's possible that, our, the amount we might need going forward in, the general fund for the invasives program is gonna be reduced from 150 to 100. It's a 300 allocation, but 150 goes to the towns, and 150, I believe, goes to the, Lake George invasive program through the Park Commission. If that were the case, if we can validate that, I think, although it may not seem like a lot of money, at least it would be a start, to maybe take those dollars, Fred, and maybe move them into like a special projects account. I don't wanna call it a capital account just yet, but, there've been a number of projects that have been discussed, and it might not be a bad idea to do that, just to begin that process. I know it's not a lot of money, but it's a start. I don't know, what do you think?
I think that makes sense, but if it's, wouldn't it have to be capital reserve
I don't know.
to create it? Yeah.
My recommendation on that would be to set it up as part of the, we've done this before, had like sub-contingency accounts, Rob, so that then we can use it for almost anything you want, so you're not stuck with a, because if you put it into a particular capital project, that could be kind of problematic, but if you put it into a, what I call a sub-contingency, so it won't be, you know, we keep track of it separate, so that then you can decide where you want to earmark it later.
But that's just like a general capital reserve, right, where you need a permissive referendum to take it out?
No,
for a
not if you put it in
specific
the, not if you put it in this contingency fund as a sub-account. It'll be part of your general fund, and you'll have the flexibility to do with it, once you assign a project to it, then you can move it. That would be my recommendation on that. I see Rob shaking his head, I think he's in agreement.
Yeah, if it's for like operating costs, like for the basis.
Right.
What you want for a capital project, then you want to set a reserve for that, but, because if it's in a contingency, once the year's done, it's gone.
Yeah, that's what I was
You know,
saying,
someday.
aren't you talking about more long-term capital type
Well, I
projects?
am, I just, not sure
Yeah.
I'm not sure we can, develop a consensus on a specific
Right.
project at this stage, but I wanted to begin the process of, beginning to allocate even modest amounts of monies to address some of the, responsibilities we have, for example, like at ACC, there are others on the
But
list
that
as
would
well.
be a general capital reserve fund, I think, not.
Well, I mean, I think
If
of
you're
that.
what you're proposing, well, it goes away at the end of the year, right?
Well, my thought is that I didn't know if you were ready
Yeah.
to actually set up a capital project at this point, and my thought was, if you put it in the sub, it budgets it, it earmarks it as part of your expenses for next year, and then January, February, March, whenever you decide, you move it from there to whatever you wanna ultimately do with it. And then it would preserve itself year
Well,
after
we
year.
have on occasion come back in the succeeding year on things that had fallen to the general fund and reappropriated, into the, see Rob shaking his head, yes. So I mean, even if we were to just reserve it in a softer fashion for now, with the understanding that it would be there for some, important project down the road, and if it were, even if it were to fall to the fund balance, we could reappropriate, I know we've done that on occasion. It would still be there, and we could reappropriate it at that time, should we have to.
Right.
Until such time as we develop a consensus on exactly where we're going.
Well, then it's at least part of your budget process, and it's.
Well, that's my
accounting for,
thinking,
right.
I know it's not a lot of money, and I understand that, but at least it begins that thought process. And if you do that a little bit each year, you know, a little bit here, a little bit there, after a while, you know.
Right.
Serious money.
Where are we at with the, the prison, position? I know we hired like half, to start with, is the other 7 or 8 is supposed to be hired in this budget?
Yeah, they're all fully funded in this budget.
The reason I bring that up is, could we postpone that 1 year? You know, we went 12 years without that amount of guards. I know the corrections came in and told us we needed more. We've facilitated half to date, but we also have an election November 3rd, where the sheriff that was involved with building the jail and operating it for years ran it with less staff, and we have less inmates there now. My talks with him is that he would solicit corrections and see if he couldn't get that reduced.
I'm not 100% sure where Sheriff York is at as far as hiring those people. I mean, I believe that they're all budgeted for this budget.
They are.
I think they were budgeted in 15, because we had
I think we were
half of them in 14, and then the rest
Right,
of them
something like that.
I may be wrong, but
I thought it was 15, half and 15.
I thought it was half in 14 and then the other half in 15. I think we're all done with that. I may be wrong, that was my thought.
have to check with the sheriff and see what the, situation, you know, if, exactly how they were funded out. But I almost think that the hiring has been done.
I didn't see it that way, because I
No?
know they had to go for training, et cetera, before they got it.
Okay,
But,
I'll give them a call.
in other words, if they haven't been hired, why can't we postpone it for a year?
Right.
Significant savings.
Maybe they haven't, because I know we had to put funding in the part-time, line for corrections, to show that it was being funded this year, in this budget. So, and then we reduced the overtime. So, you may be correct.
I mean, I'm just one member, but that's the way I view it. I'd like to hear the rest of the committee, and you know. But it
Yes.
was a significant increase that we have absorbed half so far. I'm going by the history. I've been here 10 years. We hadn't had to have those officers or that many, you know, in my tenure to date until the last 2 years. We're having a reduction in inmates, so I'm just shaking my head about this, and we have an official that operated the jail, had it built actually, who says that we can run it with less and for less money.
I think Mike I remember the way that Mike described it.
I thought we took money out of the general fund in 14 to fund for the remainder of that year. Then, I don't know whether they were hired, but I thought that the budget was, they were budgeted for in 15. I may be wrong, but I thought that was my recollection on it.
I just remember last year.
I don't remember exactly either. Mr. Westcott.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd suggest we get the sheriff in here and address this. I thought he had. I remember the, corrections, professional came and addressed the whole board. I think the sheriff has addressed this in the past, but I'd like to see him revisit it and address this, notion that there could be possibly fewer, guards. I think this committee definitely needs to look at that, if that's an
Sure.
option or not.
Yep.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay.
I have a question on, personnel request. Second page, top, create Ebola per diem. Has that job been filled yet? 'Cause I want it. I mean, we've had 2 cases of Ebola in the United States, and we're gonna budget $3,775 for Ebola per diem?
Yeah, I think that's,
100% paid for.
Oh, okay.
part of your New York State.
Well, boy. Beyond me.
I hope you're not traveling someplace, son.
I'm not.
Okay. 'Cause if you're the one person that comes down with the bill.
We'll all donate $1 to it.
So we still have the unfunded project list, which I think everybody's pretty familiar with. Is there any, additional actions on that the committee would like to,
I guess I'm not quite clear exactly what we're looking at here under this unfunded project list. It seems like there's an awful lot of ones, and, I don't know, 13 responses.
Yeah.
I guess I don't quite understand what is across the top, are those, that's 15 for some reason, plus an N, an NC, an NL, and a B. I don't know what we're looking at.
Mr. Chairman, I can help out.
Here it comes.
Part of it is that I got different responses from some
Yeah.
people, so we had to try to account for them all, but
Right.
basically the idea is that your projects, and let's just take the ACC STEM on top.
Right.
So you look down your list of projects, but start with ACC, and then go right across to the right, and you see the N, the NC, the NL, the B, but then you see 6 under 1. That means 6 people, we got 6 responses that rated that as number 1. Then we got 2 responses that rated that as number 2. We got 1 that rated it as number 3, and then 2 for number 4. And then you got 1 that rated it for 7, and 1 response said it's 11. And so if you go through each item, you kind of can see that. I was going to use X's like I did the first time, but then I realized it might get so cluttered you'd be hard to see it. So I figured put a number in instead, because then you can see it quickly. And ACC STEM generally turns out to, well, county road improvements and STEM, as you can see, both got rated number 1 at 6 times. There was interest, and then, well, the other item on this is that the N basically stands for somebody picked that but didn't rate it.
All right, I'll own up to it.
Oh, boy.
The codes come from Conover, and, but I have to say that I immediately identified the confusion it was creating and immediately amended my response.
You did, but we didn't have it in time.
That didn't get in time. What I was trying to put across is not everything listed here is a capital. And even if it were a capital, it might not meet the full definition of capital, because if it's lower than a certain dollar amount, I think the first thing you'd hear from the treasurer is, I really don't want to be borrowing for anything less than X amount of dollars. And he's shaking his head yes, and I see Rob doing the same. So I was kind of suggesting there that we really need to get to a capital definition, because some things clearly belong in the operating budget, and some things, even though they might be an improvement, would normally fall to the operating budget because they'd be a dollar amount less than what we would normally borrow at, because we wouldn't want to incur the costs against that type of borrowing. So
But I do think the takeaway on the N might be, like, if you go down the N column, and you'll see that municipal center improvements, Old Wick building, those 2 got no ratings by 6 responses. So you could, I guess you could interpret that, because the other responses they did number. So you could interpret that as they didn't feel that they even warranted, numbering them. So you could consider all that almost maybe down, those items down at the bottom of the chart, at least by some folks. It's not a perfect system. As you see, we have 13 responses, but I thought it would just give you some feeling as to where folks are thinking about what's most important.
What's the NL stand for?
That's the one we don't, that's Supervisor Conover's special designation.
I'm not sure I could remember afterwards, but something like not listed or.
And that was,
I think it had to do with this building or this campus, but didn't specify a specific improvement.
Right.
So it was like, well, what is that? So.
Mark?
Chairman, I did not get my homework assignment in, I apologize. But had I done it, I would have voted, ACC and STEM 1 and County Road Improvement 2.
Yep.
Just for the record.
Yes, Rachel?
I just wanna know, there were a lot of things I didn't rate, because I didn't really understand some of it, just what it was, and some other, it was the first time I ever heard of it. So I didn't feel like at this point it was worth me rating, because I wasn't familiar enough with it to make a decision. But, by a lot of, not because I don't think it's important, I just don't know enough about it.
I only did 1 through 8, because I thought that, the rest of them are, they're budget items as far as I'm concerned. Yes, Mr. Conover?
Yeah, on the, salary adjustments, I know, one year when we first started this process, this goes back a number of years, we, even though we had, adjustments that maybe we wanted to do more with, we set a cap and said, well, this might take us 2 or 3 years to get this position maybe where it needed to go. I was just wondering what is your thinking here that, just bite the bullet and do it, or are you planning on putting some kind of cap? I mean, some of these get up there pretty good, but, because I'm not suggesting that they're not deserving of consideration of a salary adjustment. I'm just wondering how fast and the good news is, it doesn't look like we have that many.
No.
The process has worked over the years, and it's gotten us to it. So I guess I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, what your thoughts are, is just do it and be done with it, or?
Yeah, I think so. The highest one was the personnel officer. That was to even her up with the HR director. There's not really a cap, but I know purchasing, that went up, substantial, 5,000, I think it was. I kinda feel that, you know, we're gonna be asking her to do this, consolidated purchasing of the towns, and there's a considerable amount of work with that, and, just felt that, you know, if she's, I know she's capable of doing the work if she's willing to take that on and make it work for the county. I think that's 5,000 well spent.
I agree.
Rest of them, just, with talking with the budget team, you know, that's kind of where we thought we should be.
Well, I'm considering where I know where we started though, in a previous life, I was chairman of personnel, and I know when we started this process, it was, there were a lot more, that's on the list, or a number of engineers that we had to bring up to a certain level. It took us a few years to get there. Adjustments were so significant, we could only afford to do what we could do.
Yeah, also, when I put out, not that this really probably means anything, but when I put out my, letter to the department heads, I requested them not to, seek increases, or as little as possible, so, you know, whether that had any effect on people, I'm sure it did some, and I'm sure others it didn't, so.
You need a vote or
Well, and I
a
think
resolution on what you wanted to,
I think on the projects, I think I'd get back to that. Is there anything that we wanna, try to accomplish in this budget as far as, that's right.
And just looking at these responses, now that I understand it, I mean, it looks like there were 10 that rated the county road improvements as either 1, 2, or 3, and then there were 9 ratings of 1, 2, or 3 on the ACC and STEM, and the next closest thing to that is the communications radios at 6, rated 1, 2, or 3. All the rest is really pretty scattered. So I think that tells us something about what the thinking is of the people that at least that rated it. And one on the county roads said that it wasn't capital, and I think it is capital. So whoever said that, I think, maybe thought it was number 1. I don't know.
Yes, Mark?
So we've adjusted the county roads, but we haven't accounted for the end stuff, right?
Correct.
So we've addressed the lion's share of the people's opinions on the county roads. You've done a really good job with that.
Well,
And,
it's, you know, it's a bump, it's not, you know,
it's a start, and it's a good
start.
Yep.
It's a continuation.
So we're talking, a couple $100,000 first year for NSTEM, according to, SUNY Aeronautics numbers. And then,
94,000.
94 for first year.
Right.
And then, approaching 500 for
Then it
second.
goes to, 420.
420?
For 20 years.
Still don't know where our partner Washington County is in this, but I think
Right.
at least beginning to put some money aside for, that is beginning. It would be nice to get that to the 94, at least the year 1.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a good, if that's where you're going, Mark, I think that would be not a bad thing to do, because then the question becomes, for the long-term planning, is how long will it take us, do we think, to get to the 420? Then you have that gap financing. Then you only have to deal with the shortfall over that 3 or 4 years. So, but I would agree with Mark that if, even though we're not hitting the go button on the project, because there's still some unknowns, at least that's that year 1 base coverage, should we elect to move forward.
Right, and then we will hear from Washington County what they're planning for.
Now, we are at 1.51%. You know, it's always possible to go to like 1.95%. I mean, Not that I'm a big advocate of tax increases, but I mean, you know, money's money.
I wouldn't do that.
No. That goes over the tax cap,
No, you would
Oh,
have
it doesn't go over the tax cap.
you'd have to go to
You got 2.5, right?
2.5.
2.58, right?
Well, the thought being, if you wanted money for ACC, that's another way to get it.
Again, it's the, between, really, Dan said it, between the prison, right? Reducing, I mean, let's face it, we reduced the fund balance, the appropriation of the fund balance by a lot.
Considerable.
Considerable amount of money that's now not a revenue to the budget. Million, how much was it? I don't have it right in front of me, but
1.7 million approximately.
$1.7 million that was in the budget. It's not there anymore. And then we reduced the sales tax revenue.
451.
So we've taken over $2 million of revenue out of the budget.
Part of that's deceiving, because it's related to the IGT funds, and we've changed some accounting in that, so we want to be careful of that. I think what would be most helpful is if we reran those numbers based on this for you in an actual, summary of that projections now. Because it will change and it will get better, but I don't think you got I don't think there's a neighborhood of a $2 million change. I want to make sure we know.
So you're saying part of that 1.7 is
IGT.
Right. Yeah, because we shifted those funds around because you're closing out the Westmount account and moving funds into the general fund.
But you still see the point that you increase expenditures by that amount, and then you decrease your appropriation out of your fund balance, and then on top of that, project an even bigger decrease on your revenue, especially sales tax. That it's kind of hard to entertain capital projects in that kind of scenario.
Yep, right.
Frank, if the guards have not been hired and we could initiate a savings, I would take a page from Mr. Westcott's book and take that savings and apply it towards the roads, and then see where we end up next year as far as the applicability, if we need that many, and if we didn't, then we would reap a harvest of savings next year's budget. But we would have money appropriated for roads if we decided to put off hiring of the guards 1 year. That's just a recommendation.
Yes, Mark?
What may be helpful to look at, Paul, is the operations, the budget, and then what happens when those guards are added in, and then what happens, with the 200,000 first year for the courthouse, and then what would we need to do for the extra 100 or 90 for ACC? Because what I'm getting at is, if we're basically at a flat tax raise without those guards or some other mandated expenses, you can show the taxpayers that the county has done their job on holding the line on expenses, but it's these other things outside of our control and/or the electeds that we're choosing to move forward with that are taking it above. And I think that's a good story to tell the taxpayer. You see what I'm saying?
I'm trying to follow what you would like on the sheriff's side. We already have budgeted in the workers, right? Are you asking me to, it depends on what the sheriff tells us, whether or not that number can be decreased.
Yeah, just want to see what that number is, and...
The decrease?
No, well, yes and no, but the amount that's in the budget for these extra officers, because that's, as I understand it, that's a mandated thing that we have no control over.
Right, that was the number, I think, that's approaching $1 million or $1.1 million, right?
Right.
We can get you that number.
Yeah, that's an easy number to get, because, that's a big chunk of this, is a mandated number for these guards for this jail. And, that's why, we're struggling. It's one of the reasons why we're struggling so hard. We're coming up with the money for the end step. And then you can show people that, say that's not the county's fault, it's a mandated expense. So for us to go forward with NSTEM and support our local college, this is what it's gonna mean in terms of additional expense and possibly additional tax increase.
That any,
Mr. Conor.
I feel obliged to say this, that any unfilled, maybe Rob or Mike can chime in, any unfilled position that's in the budget, all other things being equal, that revenue would fall to your fund balance, because it would be unexpended. So, one would think, at least that when we did our projections, we have, calculating our expenses against our revenue, and that at least in part, would have been taken into account, which would be involved in all unexpended dollars in the general fund, whether it be personnel or whatever, but in this instance would be personnel. So that if we're not, here's my point is if we're not delivering an increasing fund balance because other than Westmount, a one-shot kind of thing, or like garbage burning plant, a one-shot kind of thing, I'm saying if the operating condition's not delivering annually money to the general fund, then you're expending those dollars one way or another. That's my point. So really what you really need to do is take a look at where we finish this year in terms of our operating condition. To really.
And unfortunately, we won't know that till.
Right. But you see what I'm saying? In other words, that until you have those numbers, it's kind of hard to, because even though you don't feel some positions, there are other things that you encounter along the way. Maybe you expend more dollars for more paper, or more gasoline, or less gasoline, or whatever. So it's you can't just assume because the position's vacant that you saved all of those dollars.
Well, that's true, especially with the jail, because if you'll recall, they had the hot water tank and the air vents, so we had to actually spend more money for those than we had anticipated.
Well, that's right, and so but what'll be interesting is to see how we finish this year, I think. It's kind of a forward, it's kind of hard to reach back, you're better off looking forward with the information that's in front of you as opposed to going back and looking even at last year, because those numbers can get dated very quickly. That's my only comment.
Mark?
Have we provided you the type of input you're looking for?
I think so, yeah. I think,
I'm gonna have to bail pretty soon too.
I see my committee's disappearing. Mr. Brock?
Yeah, sort of getting at what Dan was talking about. If we have to hire according to the mandate, we have to hire a certain number of guards, we can still, if there's some flexibility, if we delay a month or 2 months to hire them, that would say, well, you could sort of play games with it and say, but sort of in effect, take out one, in effect, hire one less for the year in terms of the budget.
Yeah.
And then we could apply it towards, like what Ron was talking about, the ACC STEM thing, or if you want it towards the roads or whatever. But the sheriff has to go on it.
Right, but I'm sure that they're hired and then trained for.
Right, but you can delay it a month,
Right.
But I like what Mark suggested, we got the 50, if we could get to the 94, is that the number, 94?
94.
Part of that plan. If we could find some way to get to that 94, at least we have it. Should we elect to move forward with the project, should we want to move forward with the project, at least then we know we've budgeted the year one. And then we can, because there may be things information yet to receive that, who knows, maybe the sales taxes, maybe September was an aberration, I don't know. Maybe the folks at ACC have information that we don't. The foundation's prepared to do more, I don't know. But it's at least then we're not scrambling around trying to find $94,000 in an existing operating condition. That would be tough. That would be a tough thing. Doesn't mean we have to spend it. Doesn't even mean we have to do the project, but we would at least budget it for it.
Well, how does that impact?
94,
Right.
94 is recognized a Eversource for 50, right?
50.
So it's only 44?
Correct.
What is 44, what's that, what percentage impact would that have on the budget, on the tax?
This is
Pretty
gonna be a
small.
long question
Yeah.
for Frank. Do we know what a 1/10% increase in the tax levy means in dollars?
1/10%? Nope, I would have to ask Rob though for that one.
1%'s 40,000, or 400,000.
400,000, okay.
1/10%'s 40,000.
Up 10.
So raise that 1/10 of a
Raise it
percent.
1/10
Yeah.
percent, you got 40,000 to put towards
Yeah.
it. 10 cents.
I'd do it on the sales tax before I did it on the property tax, frankly. Well, I know, but we cut from our projections on the sales tax. I don't wanna say it was draconian, I think it was needed, but we made a very, very significant reduction, on our sales tax of, 1-point-something million, I think. So, it would be negligible over on that side,
If the projections hold.
if the projections hold. That's correct.
Jim?
No, I
No?
didn't.
Oh. All right. Well, I think I think I know what you want.
Better man than I am.
We'll see, I guess. Does the committee feel there's a need to meet again? I mean, I know we wanted to talk to the sheriff. I don't know, do we wanna talk to the sheriff?
I would,
He's
meet
already
again
hired
just to
him.
see the final cast. I'd like to see the final cast, I suppose you could send it out electronically, you don't have that meeting, up to the committee.
Mark?
I could go either way. It doesn't matter to me. Either he sends a written response or meets with us. And whether we get together or not, I'll leave up to your discretion. I just,
Okay.
we'll get another 4-year, revise based on these new numbers before the next budget, or
Well-
before we vote on the budget,
We can have it to you by Friday.
okay?
And we'll email it to all Warren County
And I'm
supervisors.
okay either way. If you wanna meet
All
again,
right.
that's fine. If not, that's fine too.
I'll probably sign this, Friday, so, 'cause, the longer I delay after that, it puts problems with Amanda and, getting the tax rates and all that kind of stuff. All right. There's nothing else? Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Joanne just whispered in my ear, if you're gonna sign on Friday, then can we have till Monday to get that out to you, 'cause we just wanna make sure we're using the budget officer's budget. Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
So you're gonna try to go on that thing? Jam?